So what if I told you that the absolute ultimate luxury in modern travel isn't really about what a company gives you, but, well, what they take away?
Right. The subtraction of thing.
Exactly. Because we are so conditioned, right? We think high-end travel means just an accumulation of stuff. More amenities, more giant restaurants, more entertainment.
Just like chaotic options stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, exactly. But
Yeah.
today, we are looking at a completely different business model, one that charges, tens of thousands of dollars primarily to remove the one thing you usually expect on a vacation,
Friction.
friction, and specifically, the friction of other people.
It's the privilege of absence. Because if you look at the trajectory of a travel industry over, say, the last 20 years, the defining characteristic has just been scale.
Mass market tourism.
Right. Maximizing volume to lower the individual price point. But the model we're dissecting today, they essentially reverse that entire mathematical equation.
They're engineering an environment where the primary amenity is just space and silence.
And preemptive problem solving, yeah.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are unpacking the whole world of ultra-luxury cruising, and we're specifically putting Silversea Cruises under the microscope today.
And we're basing this analysis on a really incredible updated 2026 luxury cruise guide.
Yeah, compiled by travel advisor and cruise specialist Yvonne Jr. Blanchette. So we're basically going to act as your personal travel analyst today to help you figure out if this highly specific, unapologetically premium experience is actually the right fit for your next voyage.
Because whether you're actively planning like a massive milestone trip or you're just intensely curious about the logistics.
Like how the other half travels.
Exactly. There is a total masterclass in hospitality engineering here.
So we are going to completely bypass the marketing gloss. We're tearing down the structural, the architectural, and the psychological mechanics of this entire travel model. Okay, let's unpack this.
So to understand the mechanics of what Silversea is today, in 2026, we have to look back at the economic blueprint it was built on like 3 decades ago.
Because it's not just a VIP package.
No, not at all. It's not, an upgraded wristband you buy on a normal mega ship. The physical architecture of the business is just entirely different. It started back in 1994.
Founded by Antonio Lefebvre de Video.
Right. I'm an Italian entrepreneur. And he came from a family with really deep Monaco-based maritime interests.
Which I think really explains the foundational philosophy here. He wasn't some theme park operator trying to build a boat.
No, he was a maritime industrialist trying to build a floating boutique hotel.
And the first major structural difference, the thing that honestly makes everything else we are going to talk about physically possible, is the scale.
The fleet size and the capacity.
Yeah, they operate a fleet of roughly a dozen ships, and the passenger capacity is strictly capped. We're talking between 200 and 730 guests, depending on the vessel.
And we really need to pause on those numbers for a second, because context here is everything. In the modern maritime industry, a 730-passenger ship is, frankly, a statistical outlier.
Oh, totally. The industry standard has just sprinted toward economies of scale.
Right. We routinely see megaships launching today that carry, 5, 6, even 7,000 passengers?
Plus another 2,000 or 3,000 crew members?
Yeah.
They're essentially floating mid-sized cities.
With massive propulsion systems, huge logistical supply chains.
Like a small Midwestern town just moving through the Caribbean. So when Silversea caps a ship at 730 people, they are deliberately rejecting the main economic driver of their own industry.
Precisely. They're sacrificing economy of scale for economy of space.
Space to guest ratio.
Exactly. It's a simple calculation in maritime engineering. The gross tonnage of the ship divided by the number of passengers. On a mass market megaship, that ratio is incredibly tight. They have to maximize cabins to pay for the fuel.
And to pay for the massive entertainment venues.
Right. But on a Silversea vessel, the math is inverted. Because the ticket price is so astronomically higher, they can actually afford to leave vast swaths of the ship's real estate completely open.
Which means the architecture basically dictates the psychology of your trip.
That's
Well, if you build a ship for 5,000 people, you inevitably create choke points. Everyone wants to eat dinner at 7 p.m. Everyone wants to see the 9:00 p.m. show.
Everyone wants to get off the ship at 8 a.m. when you hit port.
Yes. And it creates this underlying anxiety, this low-level hum of competition where you are constantly strategizing against your fellow passengers. But if you cap the ship at 730 people, or just 200 on their expedition ships, Those choke points simply do not exist.
It fundamentally eliminates the friction of modern travel. I mean, you never wait in a corridor. You never queue for a restaurant.
You're not elbowing someone for a deck chair at the pool.
Exactly. The ship feels more like a private members club in Mayfair or Manhattan than a traditional resort. The space allows for a complete recalibration of your nervous system.
Okay, but wait. Here is where I have to push back a little on this independent boutique private club narrative.
Oh.
Yeah, because if we look at the corporate history, in 2018, Royal Caribbean Group acquired a majority stake in Silversea and then eventually took full ownership.
That's true.
And Royal Caribbean is literally the king of the megaships. They build the largest vessels on the planet. They are the masters of the 7,000-passenger floating amusement park. So, if the mega corporation owns the boutique brand, doesn't that inevitably lead to dilution?
It's a totally valid assumption.
I mean, doesn't the corporate pressure to maximize profit eventually force them to start cramming more people onto these tiny ships?
It sounds like it should, but it really misunderstands the modern corporate strategy of portfolio management. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's very similar to what happens in, say, the automotive or fashion industries.
Like Volkswagen owning Bugatti.
Exactly. Volkswagen Group owning Bugatti or LVMH owning some tiny multi-generational watchmaker. The massive conglomerate doesn't buy the boutique brand to turn it into a mass market product.
They buy it to capture a totally different demographic.
Right, and to use it as a halo brand for prestige and, research and development.
So they ring fence it. They intentionally protect the boutique culture because that's the only reason they bought it in the first place.
Exactly. Royal Caribbean provides the massive invisible infrastructure. They provide the capital leverage to negotiate with shipyards for these cutting-edge new vessels.
And the global supply chain logistics, I imagine.
Yes. The fuel purchasing power, the advanced environmental technology research, but the Silversea brand itself, the onboard culture, that critical space-to-guest ratio, it's aggressively protected.
Because if Royal Caribbean tried to squeeze 1,500 people onto a 700-person ship,
the ultra-wealthy clientele would simply evaporate overnight. The asset would become worthless. So it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah.
You have this boutique philosophy backed by the brute financial force of a corporate giant.
which allows them to build the actual living spaces, which we need to talk about next.
Yeah.
Because if the scale of the ship is the foundation, the layout of the private quarters is where this departure from mainstream cruising becomes, like, glaringly obvious.
Oh, absolutely.
On a standard cruise, you have this incredibly rigid caste system based on cabin categories. You've got the cheap windowless interior rooms, the mid-tier balcony rooms, and then just a tiny handful of elite suites at the very top.
It's basically a microcosm of societal class structures, physically built right into the steel of the ship. The lower your deck, the smaller your room, the less access you have to premium areas.
But on Silversea, there are 0 standard cabins. The absolute lowest tier of accommodation on the entire ship is a suite.
Right. Every single guest is staying in an ocean view or private veranda suite, with generous living spaces, marble bathrooms, walk-in wardrobes.
They have completely removed the bottom and middle of the traditional cruise ship pyramid.
Which forces a massive shift in the ship's logistics. When you remove those lower-tier cabins entirely, you elevate the baseline for the entire vessel.
Right. You're no longer managing a bifurcated passenger base.
Exactly. You don't have some people eating in a crowded main dining room while others have access to a private suite-only restaurant. The entire ship is the private restaurant.
But the logistical marvel here isn't just the square footage of the rooms, right? It's the human capital deployed to manage those rooms.
Oh, the butler service.
Yes. This is the detail that absolutely fascinates me. Butler service is included for every guest, regardless of which suite you are in.
Which is pretty unheard of.
It is. And the word butler carries a lot of cultural baggage, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We immediately picture an English manor house, someone in a tuxedo carrying a silver tray, which, to be honest, feels a bit antiquated and stiff for a modern vacation in 2026.
It does. It really does. But we have to look at what a butler actually functions as in this specific hospitality environment. They are not there for archaic pageantry.
What are they doing then?
They are highly trained, preemptive problem solvers. Their entire job is to reduce your cognitive load to absolute zero.
Okay, the unpacking of the luggage is the perfect example of this.
Mm-hmm.
The guide mentions that when you arrive, the butler unpacks your suitcases for you. And at first glance, I thought, come on, I'm a capable adult. I can hang up my own shirts. But then, think about the psychology of the first day of a vacation.
It's usually exhausting.
Totally. You travel for 12 hours, you get to your room, and you have this final hurdle of chores. You have to unpack, find the safe, hide your empty suitcases under the bed, figure out the laundry system. It takes like an hour or two before you can actually exhale.
And the butler eliminates that transitional friction. You walk onto the ship, you're handed a glass of champagne, you literally just point to your bags, and you leave to go have lunch.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you return, your clothes are hung in the walk-in wardrobe, your toiletries are all arranged in the marble bathroom, and your empty luggage has just vanished.
So the vacation begins at the exact second you step over the threshold of the ship.
Exactly. And they also handle the micromanagement of the whole trip, arranging private dinners, managing your reservations, bringing you coffee exactly how you like it at exactly the right time in the morning.
But from an operational standpoint, this level of hyper-personalized attention seems like a massive bottleneck. I mean, if every single person on a 700-passenger ship is a VIP with a dedicated butler, how does the system not just collapse under the weight of all those demands?
It doesn't collapse because of the crew-to-guest ratio, which is, by the way, the most expensive metric in the entire hospitality industry.
Right.
On these ships, the ratio approaches 1 crew member for every single guest, nearly 1-to-1.
Wait, let's really visualize what that means. If there are 700 passengers, there are nearly 700 crew members on board.
Yes. And consider the physical reality of that. Half of the human beings on that vessel are there solely to facilitate the experience of the other half.
That's wild.
And those 700 crew members, they need their own sleeping quarters, their own galleys, recreation areas, medical facilities. The sheer volume of the ship's internal space dedicated to back-of-house operations is staggering. That is why it costs what it costs.
It is basically an invisible army running a massive logistical operation right beneath your feet.
And that density of staffing is what allows the butlers, and really the broader crew, to actually possess the bandwidth to observe and anticipate.
Because they aren't overworked.
Right. They are not responsible for 50 tables or 100 cabins. They actually have the time to notice your habits. Guests routinely report that within 24 to 48 hours, the crew knows their names, their preferred seating areas, their dietary quirks.
Even what drink they order before dinner.
Oh, absolutely. You walk into the observation lounge on Tuesday evening, and without you saying a single word, the bartender makes eye contact, nods, and a minute later, a perfectly mixed gin martini is sitting next to your chair.
That is the gold standard of luxury hospitality. It transcends service and becomes anticipation.
Service is responding efficiently to a request. Anticipation is fulfilling a desire before the guest even has to vocalize it. And it is structurally impossible to achieve that without a nearly 1-to-1 staff ratio.
Which I think transitions us perfectly into the financial architecture of this experience. Because the peace of mind that comes from having a butler anticipating your physical needs is totally undermined if you are constantly stressed about money.
Oh, for sure.
If the butler is removing the physical chores, the pricing model is designed to remove the mental chores.
Exactly. We are talking about the all-inclusive model, which Silversea essentially pioneered in the ultra-luxury cruise space back in 1994.
And we really need to dissect what all-inclusive actually means here, because the broader travel industry has heavily diluted that term.
They really have.
Right. If you go to a mid-tier mega resort in the Caribbean, all-inclusive usually means you get access to the buffet, you get watered-down well liquor in tiny plastic cups, and maybe some generic activity.
But the minute you want anything good.
Yeah. If you want a premium steak or top-shelf tequila or even access to the fast Wi-Fi, suddenly you're assigning receipts and getting hit with upcharges every 5 minutes. It's a complete facade of inclusivity.
Well, the Silversea model is structurally different. The upfront fare covers almost the entirety of the onboard economy.
So what exactly does that cover?
It covers premium spirits and a highly curated selection of wines. It covers dining across all venues, meaning there is no arbitrary upcharge to eat at the high-end French restaurant versus the casual cafe.
Nice.
It covers all onboard gratuities. It covers the high-speed Wi-Fi. It covers the butler. And depending on the specific itinerary, it often covers a broad selection of shore excursions as well.
So we need to talk about the psychology of this, because I genuinely believe this is the most valuable amenity they offer, even more than the marble bathrooms or the butlers. Let's look at the cognitive load of a standard vacation.
Okay.
The human brain is a prediction engine, and when money is involved, it is constantly calculating value.
Decision fatigue. It is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. Every choice you make, especially financial choices, depletes your mental energy reserves.
Exactly. On a mainstream vacation, you are trapped in a transactional mindset. You sit down at the bar, You look at the menu and you see a glass of wine for $25. Your brain instantly has to do the math.
Is this wine 25% better than the $20 wine?
Is it worth it? If I have 2 glasses, that's $50, plus an 18% automatic gratuity. Plus, I should probably tip the bartender an extra $5 in cash so he remembers me. You are literally doing algebra just to have a drink. You are constantly auditing your own relaxation.
It is the death of presence. You simply cannot be fully present in an experience if a portion of your cognitive bandwidth is constantly occupied by financial risk assessment.
I always think of it as the difference between being a customer at a phenomenal Michelin-starred restaurant versus being a guest at a wealthy friend's private estate.
That's a great analogy.
At the restaurant, the food is incredible, the service is flawless, but at the end of the night, there's this unavoidable moment of friction. They bring you a leather folder with a piece of paper, and you have to review the itemized charges, calculate a tip, hand over a piece of plastic, sign a receipt.
The final interaction you have with that establishment is a financial transaction.
Right. Whereas at the private estate, the transaction doesn't exist. You are sitting by the pool, the staff brings you a beautiful cocktail, you drink it, and you go back to reading your book. The relationship is based entirely on hospitality, not commerce.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure.
We all know this isn't magic. Silversea is a highly profitable corporate entity. You are absolutely paying for those premium drinks, those steaks, and those gratuities in the massive upfront ticket price.
Oh, 100%. You are prepaying for the luxury.
Right. So from a purely economic standpoint, what is the actual benefit to the guest? You are just moving the transaction from day 2 of the vacation to 6 months prior when you book the ticket.
Well, what's fascinating here is that you are paying for the chronological displacement of the friction. By shifting the financial pain point to 6 months before the trip, by the time you actually step onto the ship, your brain has categorized the trip as a sunk cost. The money is gone.
So your relationship with the amenities changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You aren't evaluating whether a glass of champagne is worth the cost. You are simply evaluating whether you want a glass of champagne.
And, it changes the dynamic between the guest and the crew, too.
Fundamentally. If the bartender's income relies on tips, or the cruise line's profit margin relies on alcohol sales, the crew is subtly incentivized to upsell you.
They become salespeople.
Yes. When the gratuities and drinks are already paid for, the bartender is no longer trying to extract capital from you. Their only objective is to make you the best possible drink. The financial pension is completely removed from the social interaction.
Which frees up your attention to focus entirely on the actual experience. And since we are talking about dining and hospitality being fully included, the conversation naturally has to shift to what people are actually consuming.
Food.
Because when you remove the anxiety of the bill, food becomes the central focal point of the day. And Silversea has developed a culinary architecture that goes far beyond just having good chefs.
Right. The baseline dining options are already what you would expect from ultra-luxury. The guide outlines that the vessels feature formal fine dining rooms, authentic Italian trattorias, dedicated seafood venues.
Casual cafes for breakfast, al fresco dining under the stars.
And the execution is consistently exceptional, which is a logistical feat in itself when you consider they are cooking on a moving platform in the middle of the ocean.
True. But the true differentiator, the program that really redefines how they handle food, is S.A.L.T.
Okay, yes, S.A.L.T, which stands for Sea and Land Taste. It is their signature culinary immersion program. And its entire purpose is to connect the food you are eating directly to the specific geographical coordinates of the ship.
Right. It features regional cooking classes, highly curated food-focused shore excursions, and port-inspired tasting menus.
To really understand why S.A.L.T is revolutionary, we have to understand the standard cruise industry supply chain.
Which is usually all about bulk.
Yeah. Exactly. Typically, a cruise line wants maximum consistency and minimum cost. So they provision the ship in massive centralized hubs like Miami or Southampton.
They load up frozen steaks, thousands of pounds of generic potatoes, huge vats of commercial sauces.
And the result is that the food is completely disconnected from the environment. You could be sailing through the Greek Isles, looking at ancient olive groves out the window, but you were eating a frozen chicken breast that was loaded onto the ship in Florida 3 weeks ago.
It is a closed-loop system that basically ignores the outside world.
Yes. And S.A.L.T shatters that closed loop.
It does, and it introduces a terrifying level of logistical complexity for the culinary team. S.A.L.T dictates that the menu must reflect the immediate environment, which means they are not relying solely on centralized mega shipments.
They're micro-provisioning at local ports.
Exactly.
Let's walk through what that actually looks like for the guests, because it's not just, tonight is Mexican night at the buffet with some stale taco shells.
No, it is an educational track.
Imagine you are docked in a small port in Sicily. In the morning, you don't go on a generic bus tour to look at statues.
Right, you get off the ship with the executive chef and a local culinary guide.
You travel up into the hills to a multi-generational family farm. You walk the fields. You learn about the specific volcanic soil that grows a certain type of heirloom tomato.
You taste the olive oil pressed right there on site.
You are learning the history and the agriculture of the region. And then the chef purchases those exact ingredients. You bring them back to the ship.
Yes. In the afternoon, you go to the S.A.L.T lab, which is a dedicated interactive test kitchen on the ship.
Oh, wow. So you're actually cooking.
Yes. Under the guidance of the chefs, you use those Sicilian tomatoes and that local olive oil to learn how to make traditional regional pasta from scratch. You are physically engaging with the local culture through the medium of food.
And then, the grand finale, that evening, you go to the S.A.L.T kitchen, the dedicated regional restaurant on board.
And the menu has completely transformed to reflect the Sicilian port you just left.
You are eating a refined version of the dish you just learned about, drinking a wine from the vineyard you saw from the bus.
It is a pedagogical tool. It transforms food from a mere biological necessity or even a luxury amenity into a mechanism for cultural comprehension.
That appeals so deeply to a specific type of traveler. The person who travels not just to relax, but to acquire knowledge.
Exactly. You are understanding the geopolitical history of a region through its trade routes, its spices, and its agriculture.
It basically turns the dining room into an incredibly delicious classroom. So S.A.L.T changes how you interact with the destination. But the next massive component of the Silversea portfolio changes where those destinations can actually be.
Right, moving away from the usual spots.
And this takes us far away from the Mediterranean and the Caribbean, right to the absolute edges of the map. Here's where it gets really interesting.
We are talking about expedition cruising.
Yes. This is a massive growth sector in ultra-luxury, and Silversea is heavily dominant here. We are looking at voyages to Antarctica, the high Arctic, Greenland, the Galapagos Islands.
And highly remote coastlines of Africa and South America.
Historically, there has always been a strict binary in travel, right? If you wanted to go to the most remote, rugged, punishing environments on Earth, say, breaking through the ice shelves of Antarctica, you had to accept rugged, punishing living conditions.
You were sleeping on a cramped bunk on a decommissioned Russian icebreaker.
Eating canned beans, sharing a bathroom with scientists. It was an exercise in endurance.
Right. And conversely, if you wanted the butler, the champagne, and the marble bathroom, you were geographically confined to highly developed, heavily trafficked luxury ports.
Monaco, St. Bart's, Santorini. Places with deep-water docks and massive infrastructure.
Well, Silversea looked at that binary and just completely erased it.
They engineered a fleet of specialized expedition ships that merge high-end luxury with extreme operational capability.
These ships have reinforced ice-class hulls designed to navigate polar waters. They are equipped with fleets of Zodiacs.
Those are the heavy-duty, military-grade inflatable boats, right?
Exactly, used for making wet landings on completely undeveloped coastlines. The logistics of an expedition cruise are entirely different from an ocean cruise. You are not pulling up to a concrete pier and walking down a gangway to a taxi stand.
You are operating in environments where humans are not meant to be. Let's visualize a day in Antarctica on one of these ships, because the juxtaposition of extremes is just staggering to me.
It really is.
You wake up in your heated suite, the butler brings you an espresso, you put on your heavy expedition parka and your waterproof boots, you go down to the mudroom, step into a Zodiac, and suddenly you're bouncing across freezing, turbulent water.
You make a wet landing on an ice floe. You are walking among colonies of emperor penguins. You are looking at blue icebergs that have been frozen for millennia.
It is a visceral, raw, physically demanding encounter with the most isolated wilderness on the planet.
But then, and this is the magic trick, 4 hours later, you are back on the ship.
You strip off the frozen gear. You take a steaming hot shower in a pristine marble bathroom, you put on evening wear, and you sit down to a phenomenal multi-course meal with an incredible bottle of wine, discussing what you just saw.
It is literally like taking a 5-star luxury hotel and dropping it directly into the middle of a National Geographic documentary.
And that National Geographic comparison is highly relevant, because of the intellectual infrastructure on board. An expedition ship doesn't have a massive casino or Broadway singers.
No, it has an expedition team. These are highly credentialed marine biologists, glaciologists, ornithologists, historians.
The entertainment isn't a magic show. The entertainment is a lecture on the mating habits of the marine iguana you just snorkeled with in the Galapagos.
Which reinforces the core theme of this brand: depth. You are not passively observing scenery, you are actively participating in field research. Guided by experts, but with the sharp edges of the environment completely blunted by the luxury infrastructure of the ship.
It is an incredible feat of engineering to put those two worlds together. And speaking of engineering, while the expedition fleet is out conquering the ice, Silversea's traditional ocean-going fleet is also undergoing a massive physical evolution.
They are literally changing the geometry of how a cruise ship is built to alter how guests experience the ocean.
This brings us to the Evolution class of ships, currently represented by the Silver Nova and its sister ship, the Silver Ray.
These vessels represent the architectural future of the brand, and they introduce a structural concept that is genuinely radical in commercial shipbuilding: the asymmetric hull design.
Okay, I have to admit, when I first read the phrase new class of ship in the guide, my cynical alarm bells went off.
Why is that?
Because in the mainstream cruise industry, a new class usually just means they figured out how to weld a larger roller coaster onto the top deck, or they built a bigger go-kart track, or a massive indoor water park. Asymmetric hull sounded to me like an engineering flex, like a buzzword that the architects care about, but the guest won't even notice. Does the guest actually feel the difference?
To understand why it matters, you have to understand why cruise ships have been perfectly symmetrical for the last century.
Okay.
From a pure engineering and physics standpoint, symmetries is the easiest way to ensure structural integrity and a stable center of gravity. If you put a massive, heavy dining room on the port side, you need to balance it with an equally heavy space on the starboard side.
Which results in a very specific interior layout.
Yeah.
It forces the ship to look inward.
Exactly. Traditional cruise ships have a central spine, a long interior corridor running down the middle, with equal-sized rooms and public spaces flanking both sides.
The grand atriums, the main promenades, they're all buried in the center of the ship.
You can walk through a modern megaship for an hour, go shopping, eat at a restaurant, go to a bar, and literally forget you are on the ocean. The ship is a self-contained mall that happens to be floating.
The Evolution class completely detonates that concept. By utilizing advanced materials and complex weight distribution engineering, they manage to offset the ship's layout. It is asymmetric. The central spine is pushed off-center.
And the architectural payoff of that complex engineering is space. By moving the structural core off-center, they opened up massive, unobstructed areas on one side of the ship.
This allowed them to incorporate huge expanses of glass and panoramic, outward-facing public spaces. It changes the entire relationship with the environment. The ship is no longer a closed-off mall. It is an observation platform.
The pool deck is a perfect example of this. On a symmetric ship, the pool is usually dead center, surrounded by stadium seating or massive walls blocking the wind. It feels like an amphitheater.
But on the Silver Nova,
because of the asymmetry, the pool area is pushed right to the edge. It opens up a completely unobstructed panoramic view of the horizon. You are swimming while looking directly out at the Mediterranean or the Caribbean.
it proves that innovation in ultra-luxury isn't about adding noise or gimmicks. It's about manipulating light, space, and perspective.
Space really is the ultimate luxury.
Just having the physical room to breathe and look at the horizon without visual interruption. Okay, so we have established the structural reality of Silversea, the one-to-one service ratio, the true all-inclusive pricing, the S.A.L.T culinary integration, the expedition capabilities, and the outward-facing architecture.
But the real question for anyone listening is, how do you know if this is the right ultra-luxury line for you?
Because Silversea isn't the only player in this space.
Yeah.
If you're going to spend this kind of money, you need to know exactly what you are buying and what you are sacrificing.
Right, and the guide provides a really sharp competitor analysis breaking down the other heavyweights. Region 7 Seas, Seabourn, and Crystal Cruises. We need to dissect this decision matrix.
Yes, let's get into it.
Evaluating ultra-luxury travel is never about finding the objectively best cruise line in a vacuum. It is about identifying which brand's specific trade-offs align perfectly with the traveler's personal priorities.
Makes sense. Let's start with Region 7 Seas. The industry generally views them as Silversea's most direct competitor, in terms of hardware and pricing, right?
Yes. And Regent is famous for leaning incredibly hard into the all-inclusive model. In fact, their biggest differentiator is that they include a massive array of shore excursions right in their base fare.
Okay, so on Silversea, while some excursions are included on specific itineraries, Regent includes nearly every standard tour in every port. So, logically, if Regent includes the excursions, doesn't that make them mathematically more inclusive and therefore a better value?
This raises an important question, right? It depends entirely on how you define value and how you like to travel.
Okay, how so?
Regent offers a highly structured, comprehensive, predictable package. If you are a traveler who wants to wake up, look at a list of 5 standard bus tours, pick one, go see the major historical sites with the guide, and come back to the ship without ever thinking about a logistics bill, Regent is flawless.
But there is a trade-off for that breadth of inclusion.
Yes. Regent allocates a massive amount of their corporate resources to funding those thousands of daily excursions. Silversea takes those same resources and deploys them differently.
How do they deploy them?
Silversea trades the Universal Excursion Inclusion for an unmatched expedition program, which requires astronomical capital to operate, and for the deep culinary immersion of the S.A.L.T program.
Oh, got it. Regent doesn't have an equivalent to S.A.L.T.
Exactly, and their expedition presence is minimal compared to Silversea's dominance in the polar regions.
It's the classic breadth versus depth argument. Regent gives you breadth,
Yeah.
standard access to everything. Silversea gives you depth, hyper-specialized, culturally rich access to specific things.
Exactly. Now, let's look at Seabourn. The guide categorizes Seabourn as best for intimacy.
Seabourn operates very small yacht-like vessels, right?
Yes, and their service culture is phenomenally personalized, very akin to the butler service on Silversea.
So where do they diverge?
They diverge on geography and capability. Seabourn offers an incredibly refined country club atmosphere on board, but their destination network is smaller.
So if your primary goal is simply to be on a beautiful ship, experiencing flawless service in a warm climate, Seabourn is a spectacular choice.
But if the destination is your primary driver, if you want access to a library of 900 different ports, or you want to break through the ice in Greenland Silversea's scale and dedicated expedition fleet, give them a massive advantage.
And the final competitor the guide highlights is Crystal Cruises.
Mm.
Crystal has a very distinct reputation. They are categorized as best for long voyages.
They have a fiercely loyal clientele who will spend months at a time on board doing world cruises. Crystal excels at creating a fluid residential atmosphere.
Their ships feel like floating luxury condominiums.
Right, the spaces are grand, the dining is highly traditional and excellent, and the service is very consistent. But crucially, Crystal completely lacks an expedition program. They are ocean liners in the traditional sense.
They will take you from Sydney to Singapore in absolute comfort. But they are not dropping a Zodiac into a volcanic caldera in the Galapagos.
Precisely. So when you synthesize this entire matrix, Silversea claims the crown when a traveler wants a very specific combination of variables.
The rugged capability of an expedition, the massive geographical range of 900 ports, the uncompromising baseline of an all-suite, all-butler ship, and the intellectual culinary engagement of the S.A.L.T program.
Which brings us perfectly to the final verdict.
So what does this all mean? Let's synthesize all this data, all the logistics, all the psychology, and apply it directly to you, the listener. Should you be booking a ticket on Silversea?
The guide lays out a very clear profile of who this is for, but almost more importantly, who this is absolutely not for.
Identifying who will be miserable on this product is essential, because at these price points, a mismatch in expectations is a disaster.
The source is explicit. Silversea is not designed for travelers who measure the success of a vacation by the sheer volume of external stimulation.
If your idea of a perfect vacation is waking up, sending the kids to a massive onboard water park, going ziplining over the pool deck, competing in a belly flop contest.
Eating at a teppanyaki restaurant with fire jugglers.
Yes, and then watching a full-scale Broadway production of Grease before hitting a thumping nightclub, you will be bored out of your mind on Silversea.
You will feel utterly understimulated. There are no massive theatrical productions. The onboard entertainment is subdued, a jazz quartet, a classical pianist, a lecture from a visiting historian.
The ships are quiet. They shut down early. But if we flip the profile, we can see exactly who will thrive here.
It is for experienced luxury cruisers who have outgrown the megaships and want the next level of refinement.
It is for couples or solo travelers celebrating a significant milestone who want zero logistical friction.
It is for genuine expedition seekers who want to see Antarctica without sleeping on a cot.
And it is for travelers who view food and culture as the primary reason to leave their house. It comes back to how you define value.
Mass market value is breadth. How many different things can I do today? Ultra-luxury value, specifically the Silversea model, is depth. How perfectly can this one specific thing be executed?
Exactly. The value is the depth of the service, where a butler learns the exact temperature you like your morning tea. It is the depth of the culinary exploration, where S.A.L.T. traces the lineage of your olive oil back 400 years.
It is the depth of the destination, making a wet landing on an island that a 5,000-passenger ship couldn't get within 50 miles of.
If your ideal day consists of waking up in total silence, taking a guided nature walk with a working biologist, returning to learn how to cook regional pasta from a local chef,
Reading a novel on your private veranda without hearing a single announcement over a loudspeaker.
and having your favorite vintage of wine poured without ever signing a receipt, then this is a highly engineered sanctuary built entirely for you.
So let's recap this incredible deep dive.
We started by looking at the pure mathematics of scale, how restricting a ship to 700 passengers and deploying a 1-to-1 crew ratio fundamentally rewrites the rules of hospitality.
We unpacked the role of the modern butler, not as a symbol of status, but as a mechanism to eliminate logistical friction.
We explored the psychology of true, all-inclusive pricing and how upfront costs cure decision fatigue.
We dissected the massive supply chain complexities of the S.A.L.T. program, turning dining into an educational tool.
We marveled at the dual nature of expedition cruising, merging raw wilderness with refined comfort. And we looked at the structural innovations of the evolution class, using asymmetric architecture to turn the ship outward toward the sea.
And as we conclude, there is a broader philosophical question hidden within the architecture of this brand, something for you to consider.
Oh, I like this. What is it?
We discussed how Silversea is an independent-feeling boutique culture, but it survives and innovates only because it is backed by the massive corporate treasury of Royal Caribbean Group.
Right, the conglomerate protecting the boutique.
Yes. But as these massive megacorporations continue to acquire small, ultra-luxury brands across all sectors of travel, giving them the capital to build incredible engineering marvels like the Silver Nova will, the fundamental definition of luxury eventually shift. Can these small ships truly remain an isolated, fiercely independent sanctuary for mass tourism indefinitely? Or will the immense gravitational pull of corporate industrialized scale eventually start to blur the lines between true boutique travel and mass market efficiency?
That is a phenomenal question to leave on. Can the private clubs survive indefinitely inside the corporate empire? It is something to seriously think about the next time you are weighing your travel options. I want you to really reflect on what you truly value in a travel experience. Do you want the noise, the endless options, and the sheer energy of scale? Or do you want the quiet, the depth, and the butler waiting on the serene dock to take your bags so you can finally just exhale? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.